Hello and welcome to GBH Amplifies the Bay State Banner. I'm your host, Ronald Mitchell, publisher and editor of the historic Bay State Banner News. As the Bay State Banner celebrates 6 decades as New England's largest and oldest minority-owned news entity, we have launched our State of Black America Forum series to discuss the challenges and successes we as a community have experienced over the past 60 years. The world is experiencing very challenging times right now, and as journalists, it is our responsibility to present the truth and important information to our readers, viewers, and listeners, with the intention for them to be inspired by this information to make the best choices for themselves. Today, our State of Black America Forum series presents Democracy on the Line, Black Journalists and the Battle for a Free Press. Today, we turn our spotlight on some of the nation's leading journalists on the front lines, shedding light on some of the compelling cultural issues facing Black and brown America today. Please help me welcome our civil rights icon and champion, Dr. Benjamin Chavis, President of the National Newspaper Publishers Association and Black Press of America, the largest and most influential Black-owned media resource in America covering critical issues. NNPA represents some 232 minority-owned news outlets reaching more than 22 million people each week. In addition, Dr. Benjamin Chavis is the host and executive producer of the Chavis Chronicles right here on PBS. Along with Dr. Benjamin Chavis, to my right with us is Ebony McMorris, White House correspondent for America Urban Radio Network, the #1 Black-owned Nielsen-rated national radio network. AURN is one of 2 Black-owned broadcast companies with a bureau in President Trump's White House press room. So we know she'll have some amazing stories to share with us. In addition to Ebony, to my left we have Phil Lewis, deputy editor at the Huffington Post. In his role, Phil and his staff are responsible for presenting important news stories nationwide. During his time at the Huffington Post, Phil and his team won a 2021 National Headliner Award for their reporting on Black voters in South Carolina. He is also an author of the award-winning newsletter, What I'm Reading. Despite his busy schedule, he also has time to work with high school students as a teacher in an urban journalism workshop. And finally, to my left, we have Michael Harriot, award-winning journalist and author of Black AF, The Unwashed Histories and Stories of America. Michael Harriot is also a journalist, was a former journalist for the Griot, and he is the only other, Michael Harriot was a former journalist for the Griot, and the Griot is one of the only other Black-owned press outlets with a dedicated seat in the White House press room. So thank you all for being here. So let's get started with our first question for you, Dr. Chavis. Dr. Benjamin Chavis, as a civil rights icon, you have personally been unjustly incarcerated for your political beliefs in the past. So what do you say to the many Black journalists who face these drastic actions by the current administration to suppress their honest coverage of their current attempts to dismantle Black history, DEI, and democracy?
Well, as a famous struggle out of the liberation of our people in Africa and North America, and that is a luta continua. The struggle continues. And certainly as we wind down 2025, we're going into 2026, with the question of democracy, with the question of inclusion, with the question of equity, with the question of whether or not journalists from our community even have the access that we used to have to so-called mainstream media. But on the other hand, this emphasizes the importance of Black-owned media. I'm so pleased to be a part of this panel. Salute to you, Ron Mitchell, and the Bay State Banner newspaper, 60 years old, and we're going to have a great discussion. But I'm just saying that, look, for 199 years, the Black press in America has been on the front line, not only reporting the news, but being an advocate for freedom, justice, and equality.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much. For our second question, we want to go over to you, Ebony. So I just want to remind everybody, Ebony McMorris is a White House correspondent in the Trump White House press room. So I just want to, everybody, give the sister a round of applause for what she has to put up with every day. So we know earlier, not too long ago, as Trump began to ramp up his attacks on black journalists and black female journalists especially, he had a tirade against you in one of his moments. Can you share with us a little bit what that was like to experience that and what you drew on from your personal journalist experience to help you tamp him down and continue to do your job in that environment?
Thank you. Let me just say first, it's an honor to be here with you, especially in Boston, a place where like the fight began.
It did. We threw out one king.
Right. So
we can throw out another.
We sure enough can. Many people saw that moment when the president called me obnoxious and it went viral, but what a lot of people don't know is how that moment started. And just 5 seconds, it started with me on my way to work in tears, crying, calling my mother, and saying, I'm tired of this. My mother is a minister. And I said, I don't feel like being here. She said, well, you have your questions for the day? I said, I don't have no questions for the day. I'm done. They're not going to call. I'm done. I'm tired. I think everyone who, when you are pursuing justice, that push, like that emotion, sometimes you're like, I can't do it today. And I was she said, no, stop. She said, you got to understand why you're here and why you're called to be here. And I said, why am I here? I was having one of those mornings.
Okay, yeah, we've all had those moments.
And I maybe have asked 1 or 2 questions before, but it had been a stretch. And I said, they probably won't call me anyway. And she said, no, take your behind downstairs in your booth and prepare yourself. And I said, and we prayed. And in that prayer, it was about me. It wasn't about Trump. And it was reminding me of my role. When we got into that Oval Office that day, I was thinking all day about Memphis, what's going to happen with Memphis being militarized. And I always yell out questions, but today I was like, I'm not going to stop. And I just kept pressing, Mr. President, what are you going to do about Memphis? Because you can't say a long sentence. And then he ignored me. Finally, I just began to talk over him, and he said, you're obnoxious. And I said, no, I'm not. I had planned a whole Easter speech in my mind a long time ago about what I was going to do because I had seen him berate everybody. But in the moment, you don't have time for all that. But I did say, I am not going to let you do that. And I said, no, I'm not. What are you doing in Memphis? He then again called me obnoxious. I said, no, I'm not, Mr. President. What are you going to do about Memphis? He then came back and said, quiet. Don't talk till I calling you. And then I paused for a second and then asked the question again. Of course, he never answered it. But
your persistence was impressive.
And that's what we have to have, because when I got home, my niece that we raised said, you're so obnoxious. I said, you are not allowed to do that. And I said, but do you know what obnoxious means? And when we looked it up, I said, you know what? I am obnoxious about my people. I am obnoxious. I will be obnoxious when it comes to getting out information to communities and marginalized communities that this administration has attacked. So now, fine, I'll be that, but I'll still keep pressing.
Well, thank you for standing up. That's an amazing story. Thank you so much. So, Phil Lewis, Huffington Post. Phil, I want to talk with you about how you and the team over there have dealt with the multiple elections. And, you know, the Huffington Post is an alternative platform. It's been around for a couple decades now. But talk to us about the importance of presenting news in alternative platforms and your experience working with your team, you know, to deal with the current, you know, struggles and suppression of DEI in our Black history.
Yeah, well, I've been at HuffPost since 2015 at this time, and you can see I've only dealt with journalism through the lens of Trump, right? So, you know, you can say fortunately or unfortunately, right? So, what's clear to me right now is that we're in a moment where we can't afford to mince our words, right? And HuffPost is a place where I've seen us be very direct with what's happening. This assault on democracy, we've been very direct in ways that a lot of legacy media has not been. And in this moment where just journalism, news media is very fractured at the moment, it's up to newsrooms that don't have to necessarily deal with billionaire owners who are pressing their ideas and their feelings and putting their thumb on what is supposed to be independent news coverage.
We have definitely seen legacy corporate media suppressing true journalistic voices.
Exactly. And so having the ability to own your own sort of platforms, where we're not worried about a Musk or a Bezos or anybody like that.
Coming in and putting their thumb on the scale.
On the scale is really important. And even with social media, where I thrive on social media, where I share stories of things that are happening all over. Even I know that on social media, somebody can come in and one of these tech oligarchs can come in and say, like, actually, we want to change the algorithm completely. And so we're always kind of hopping around trying to figure out where we can go next. Now we're on Blue Sky, now we're on Threads, and now we're on all these other things. But the only way around that is to find your own platforms, like a Roland Martin, right, or like a Don Lemon, who's finding these different platforms to use, and pushing out what we believe to be the truth.
Thank you for that. It is important. So now we're going to move over to you, Michael. You are obviously an award-winning journalist, and your Black AF history of the unwashed story of America is a wonderful narrative. Can you share with us some of your theses on that, especially in this time when, the whitewashing of America is full throttle by many, many forces in our community nationwide? Can you talk with us about that?
Well, yeah, so we're in a space now that we can see all of the things that Black people have been saying for years. One of the reasons we think people think of the word woke, right, as something that is new. There's this new wokeness when it is that white people are hearing the things that Black people have been saying for 400 years now because of the democratization of media, because of Black media. Martin Luther King said 60 years ago, Black media is the conscience of America. It's the only place that speaks the truth to America. If you go back 100 years ago and read a headline of the New York Times, it says that the Black people were rioting in Oklahoma in Tulsa when the white people attacked them. It calls the stuff that we call now, like, it was not until very recently that all of the stuff that as massacres were just called race riots, as if there were both sides. And what we're seeing now is that we're exposing that with mainstream media. What you thought was this veneer of objectivity was just white people's version of the story, right? Like, we saw that with George Floyd. For 2 days, the report was that he had a medical emergency on the way to the hospital. The same thing with so many, Breonna Taylor.
Yep.
It was just an accidental medical emergency. And because of Black media removing that veneer of objectivity to show what you thought was objectivity was the white people's version. When I started in media, you couldn't even use the word racist. That was an unfair accusation. And now they see that there is a definition of racist, and if it fits the thing that you're describing, then you have to use that word. And I think that we're seeing now with this administration and with the kind of Redeemer movement emerging, that America has always been a way. It's unwhitewashing itself. We don't even have to do it anymore.
Well, it definitely is a tumultuous time, and I thank you for that. I often tell folks the story of when I was deciding whether I wanted to purchase the Bay State Banner some 3 years ago, and as I really learned and looked and talked with my family about the value of Black journalism, I remind folks that for the past 200 or 300 years, the only place you could go, or 200 years as you explained, the only place you could go for many, many centuries to see positive images of ourselves was Black-owned publications. And that speaks to the importance and why many Black-owned newspapers still exist when many other newspapers have gone digital or fallen by the wayside that aren't Black-owned. Dr. Chavis, this is a wonderful, wonderful transition for you to talk about the importance of NNPA and your organization and the importance of Black journalism, not just to talk about the challenges, but to also talk about the successes and the joy of our people.
Thank you. The first African-American owned newspaper was published on March 16th, 1827, almost 199 years. In 2027, we'll celebrate the 200th anniversary of the Black press. Now, I know in 2026, there's a celebration of the 250th anniversary of the United States. And certainly Boston plays a key role in being the so-called cradle of American democracy. And the question is Boston the cradle of telling the truth? Is Boston the cradle of inclusion? I look at all the pressures that these major universities here in Boston are now having to bow down to pressure from forces that don't believe in freedom of the press, that don't believe in the freedom of assembly, who don't believe in the freedom of religion, who don't believe that black people even belong in America. So I think that the role of the black press, to answer your question, National Newspaper Publishers Association, which was started in 1940, we have 235, and your paper is a member of the NMPA, on the front lines. And it's a challenge. We live in a digital age. So how do you keep newspapers alive in a digital age? And certainly this program, we have to be in multimedia forms. We have to be on television, we have to be on radio, we have to be in social media, we have to be in print, we have to be in digital. You know, we can't leave any media space where we're not participating. And we should not have any media space where we're not participating from our own ownership. We need to own our narrative. We need to own our content and get that content distributed.
Ebony, that's very important. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Chairs. Ebony, talk to us about working in the White House environment as a representative of the Black Radio Network, and even most recently an experience you were sharing about one of the most recent tirades. How do you tolerate that? I know you talked about that experience where it impacted you personally, but most recently when you were in the White House and he was just kind of going on and about in general.
We can pick a day for that one, right? I mean, many people probably saw the president supposedly going to Philadelphia to deliver his economic agenda. And all we saw there were just racist rants about people of color, calling them filthy, disgusting, going after Somalians. And so the experience there, I'll just say this, you said this in the beginning, AURN was just celebrated 50 years last year, but we are one of two Black owned and operated, along with the GRIO, dedicated, we have seats in the White House briefing. And so it is a challenge with any administration, because I just want people to know it's not going to stop with the Trump administration. There were other administrations too. Black folk have always had to push. Ethel Payne had to push when she talked to Eisenhower about Brown v. Board and whether or not he was going to protect black folk when it came to desegregation. And she got silenced for 7 years, but she still pressed. Alice Dunnigan went through the same thing, and so many others. And so it is just every day you have to remind yourself the importance of the fourth estate, which is press. And then alongside that is black press, which you said earlier, Michael, we are I say moral consciousness of press. It's important because you can get distracted very easily. But if you do that, then you'll miss what's happening literally in your city. I'm DC born and raised, right? And so we're seeing when the president wanted to militarize our streets. We're, like I said before, in Memphis, all over. And so you have to keep your eyes on the prize and what the current issue is, or else you will not remember what your role is, and you'll get caught up. We are sometimes the only spaces where truth is, because mainstream media is not going to do the job in bringing you the sources that we can get. They don't understand our communities, and they don't give a representation that people can trust. Most black folk don't trust it.
And often mainstream media falls prey to the distraction. The distraction is the point. The look over here, the craziness, the madness, to distract you from what's really going on. So,
well, you have to look at the ownership, and I congratulate you on 2 years of now being in ownership, because most of these companies are owned by 6 major companies. We're seeing a big merger right now. So who's at the end telling the story? You know who's on your camera, but who's really behind the scenes,
who's
controlling the narrative?
Yeah,
so our spaces become very important to us. We have to realize that.
Definitely. Michael, I want to pop over to you real quick, because you publish your stuff on various different platforms. So I wanted you to share with us some of the various different platforms. I know you're not with the GRIO anymore, but you're award-winning in many of your articles and columns are very powerful.
So on January 27th, the day that Trump was inaugurated, I realized that we were going to be in a new landscape. So me and a collective of journalists came together and founded Contraband Camp. And we have contributors that you recognize, Joy Reid, Tiffany Cross, Ellie Mastal.
Share with us that website again.
Contrabandcamp.com. And if you don't know the story of contraband camps, after the Civil War, black people freed themselves during the Civil War. And they gathered in these places because they had no technical legal status. They were not citizens of the country, and they had stolen themselves, so they were contraband of war. So they formed these contraband camps, and many of the majority black cities or the neighborhoods in majority black cities that you know today were actually originally contraband camps. And I think that is what we have to do in this era where we're seeing not just media kind of whitewashing, but tearing itself apart. We see what's happening to CBS News, right? We see what's happening to the Washington Post. And it's capitalism, the carnivorous forms of capitalism, kind of eating away at the fourth estate, journalism. And what they're doing is saying there is a place, we can control where truth exists.
Propaganda, straight up propaganda.
And they can't, because the first thing of propaganda is not making up an alternative story, it's erasing the truth. And I think that that's what I'm trying to do, that's what these journalists are trying to do. And so contraband.com it's a multi-level platform. It's writers who from all other platforms are publishing their thoughts and their journalism there to get them out to the public.
Did you want to say?
I want to say something because, and I want everybody to read the article that Michael just put out. It's really great. I was just thinking of what we were talking about earlier. But I want people to understand
Contrabandcamp.com. Contrabandcamp.com. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
the what this administration just recently did. I know most people don't go to whitehouse.gov, but there literally is, they just put up on there a page where they have a list of media that they're going after. So if they don't like the article that you wrote, it's called, like, they call it fake news list. It's literally on the website. And they will take the article, put it up there, tell why they think that it's fake news. And so they are making, they want Americans to hate. It's really their enemies list, I'll say. This is their Nixon enemies list. And they just got it up, I think, last week. This is part of that propaganda wheel that they are spinning. I just wanted to say that because that's also why these voices are important. I've never seen, you correct me if I'm wrong, a president literally do that on the website. They have erased. We see the erasure of black folk when it comes to the Pentagon, to memorials, to everything. When they attacked DEI, they were attacking stuff I didn't even know was really, it's like, are you really doing this? Yeah. But they are, and they put it in a book, Project 2025. They have not steered from the script. And so I need people not to be alarmed all the time, but to read what they've already told you that they are going to do and that they are doing. And then I want you to check where you get your information. Because when people say, I don't see this happening, or who is doing this or who is doing that, my first question is, where do you go to read? Are you always stuck on Main Street? What are your sources?
Yeah, it is important in our society for democracy to work to have an informed electorate. I add the word intelligent as well, but we hope for the best. But you definitely have to have an informed electorate. And the rise of authoritarianism and fascism, their main tools are altering the truth, providing misinformation. So as we see our current administration lean into authoritarianism, that's one of the tools at the front of their playbook. Phil, I want to turn back to you. I know that you work a lot with younger journalists as well. Talk to us about the platforms that are important to you to get your message to that younger audience.
Yeah, well, let's see. So I do a program called the Urban Journalism Workshop. It is an arm of the Washington Association of Black Journalists, of which I'm president, Ebbing's member. And so we work with high school students in the DC area. And one of the things that I've noticed is that these are students who are highly engaged. And so when we have conversations, we talk about the apathy that a lot of their friends might have. Like, our students are usually students who are like, yeah, we read, what's happening on the news, like we know what's going on, but maybe our friends don't. Maybe they don't understand why. Maybe they don't know where to find stories, because there's a difference between just the general media, which everyone consumes the media, but are you looking at actual news websites. And what I mean by that is we have a lot of our children and our youth that are sort of mindlessly scrolling, and they're consuming all sorts of things online. Sometimes we don't even know what they're consuming. And so that is a difference between, are they actually looking for real sources, real stories, real articles? That's not always what they're finding online. And so what I try to do with social media, at least my social media presence, is to share stories that I know are well sourced, that I know have been thoroughly reported on, because that's the only way we're going to be able to kind of get through this moment where disinformation and misinformation has reigned, especially online, because these platforms like X and Facebook, they are pushing a lot of this slop and content and things that are online now, which has made it very difficult for folks like the people on this panel to do our jobs. And so
I want to share a personal experience. I had a shocking conversation with my youngest, who was in college, during the campaign. And I said, so you're all set, we're coming up, the election, you're gonna vote? And he was like, yeah. I said, well, I assume it's coming. And he said, well, I got some questions about her and how she treated black women. I was like, whoa. And it just shocked me, the amount of disinformation he was getting. I sat down with him, my oldest son, and we had a heartfelt conversation about the value of the news that you get and how important it is. And that was also why it was so important when myself and co-owner Andre Stock purchased the banner, that we updated the website, that we created a half-hour streaming newscast hosted by Brigette Williams, our streaming news anchor. And it's not that half-hour anchor format that's the most important thing. It's the ability to chop each individual story into a 45 or 60-second clip and to put it on all those platforms that our young adults read. It is imperative to do that. And I know that this is a model, Dr. Chavis, that many of the NNPA newspapers and news outlets are working on. Can you talk to us about the importance of our young people? I know that was the anchor of the civil rights movement and also sways, helps to push that moral pendulum in our country.
Well, thank you. Our young people are our future, but I'll also say they are our present. I think that we have to raise up a generation of freedom-fighting journalists, freedom-fighting truth-tellers. And the good news is, and that's why I come today as an optimist, because I see a generation not only of black youth, but white youth, Latino youth, Asian American youth, Native American youth, who are not accepting the BS. I could say something else, but I know this is
the misinformation.
PBS.
The misinformation.
But the thing is, we should help them shape the future, not just report on the future.
Right.
Future has to be shaped. And that's the job of those of us who've been in the movement a long time. We dare not let a gap happen between generations about what our freedom struggle is about. We would not know who Emmett Till was if it wasn't for Jet Magazine.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Let's be clear. We would not know who Fannie Lou Hamer, her famous saying, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired,
Right.
if it wasn't for the black press.
Come on.
And so the question is, how can we make sure and ensure that our young people today not only get this content, but they also help take it and help reshape it and put it into a language that they understand. I got involved in hip-hop at a early, most of my colleagues in the civil rights movement didn't like hip-hop. I said, wait a minute. This is a cultural phenomenon among our young people. This is how they're communicating. We need hip-hop journalists that also report the truth. They'll also show the video. Everybody, to sell a good record, you gotta have a certain kind of video to get the record sold. Well, I would like to have a certain kind of video to get the news reported. These platforms that are out here, I think that we should make sure that, and I think something that Phil said, we disproportionately are engaged in platforms that we don't own. We're disproportionate on Facebook. We're disproportionate on TikTok. We're disproportionate on Instagram. We're disproportionate on X. And so the question is, should we also be contemplating writing our own algorithms, facing a situation where we can have our own platforms? The reason why I'm a strong supporter of the American Urban Radio Network, because it's black-owned, and that's so important. The disrespect that Ebony gets at the White House is just not a personal thing between Donald Trump and Ebony.
Right.
This is a statement that Trump has for our community. And we have to make sure that we not only respond, but don't get caught up where people kind of invite us into their playing field, where the game is already set up that we can't win. We need our own narrative, we need our own platforms, and most of all, give our young people credit for their intelligence. I think black youth today, and all youth, are the most intelligent, the most gifted, the most talented generation of young people we've ever been blessed to witness. But these young people need to be encouraged. There's a lot that discourages our young people. The whole school to prison pipeline, and I think that we have to work on these issues. I don't want to put everything on the press, but let me say this. Without the press, without the black press, we would not have made the progress that we've made thus far.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. We can all applaud that. Share with us your NNPA's website so that the viewers can tune in. I know that
the one for news is blackpressusa.com.
Blackpressusa.com.
Yes.
Blackpressusa.com. Go to it, view it, read the information. It's real good journalism. So I want to turn back over here to Michael. Talk with us again about some of the biggest challenges you see, some of the biggest challenges you say as we move forward in our responsibility to provide truth to our listeners and readers and viewers.
Well, I think Dr. Chavis and Phil pointed them out, right? I think one of the challenges is that because of the proliferation of social media, we don't understand the distinction between content and journalism. One is a thing that somebody says. There is no barrier to putting a viewpoint on the internet, right? And the other one is a sourced, researched, approved, vetted look at a problem. It is the journalism, there's this statement that says journalism is the first draft of history. And when what we've seen is people conflate a guy who's saying this thing on the internet with actual journalism. And we have to be able to distinguish between the two. If this person is not saying someone on TikTok can't be a journalist, right? But a journalist, when they say a thing on TikTok, here's how you tell the difference. They don't say, this thing happened across the street. They say, according to my source,
it's been reported.
This is the thing that happened. This is where it happened. And you can tell those differences when they're telling you where they got the information from. That's the easiest way to tell something that somebody's saying from something that somebody's feeling or just putting on the internet. And I think we have to know the difference. And the other challenge is, as Phil said, what the media is doing now is putting their thumb on the scale, right? Phil has one of the most popular accounts on the internet that shares journalism. Yep. And I bet you he could tell you, and I hadn't even asked him this question, where he can see how many people read his stuff, and I bet you it has declined since Elon Musk bought Twitter, because all black people have seen their information just be shadow banned. It is being curbed. And so that's how they put that. They don't have to say, we're going to limit this and limit that. They can write the algorithm in a way that some people and some accounts are more important than others. And in a sense, that is how America has always dealt with the black press. The algorithm of America says the New York Times is more important than the North Star. The algorithm of America says that the guy, Casey Kasem, was more important than black radio DJ. Right? And we've seen that now play itself out in social media. So beware of what you get, where you get your information from, and look and pay attention to what's being presented to you. Because you notice now, when you open up your social media app, it's not the people you follow. It's the people they're giving to you. They're saying, here are the people who are important for you to see.
These are the people and information.
This is what we want you to see.
Yes.
Right? It's not even the people you follow. And now that they've put their thumb on the scale, it's important to specifically go to black journalism. Black News US, blackusa.com, the Huffington Post, and places where you can trust the people who are delivering your news.
In the very beginning, when we purchased the banner, one of my main motivations was, as a corporate, as a former television cameraman and one who motivated a lot of stories, I watched the industry change from what I refer to as journalism to influencism. When you create a story and your motivation is to influence clicks, you moderate the journalism. You alter the story to make it more exciting in the beginning, to motivate people to click. And then at the end, I would see journalists, or I would see reporters trying to back out of the excitement that they scared you with and say, oh no, it's not really like that at the end, but it's too late. It's going to either be journalism or it's going to be influencism. And I'm happy to say that the banner is always focused on journalism, like the folks on this panel, and it's really, really important to our community that we, as journalists, live up to that commitment as we all do. Ebony, talk to us a little bit more about your radio network and how, black culture, black radio has always been on the forefront of civil rights. And you take that responsibility very, very seriously. So talk with us a little bit more about how your radio network deals with the current climate and presenting those important stories. Good stories as well, and the positive things too.
Well, right now, I'll just say some stories that we're working on is reminding people the history of the White House. You don't get to the White House without black hands. Heck, you don't get to Harvard without black bodies. The same from Georgetown to Yale to anything else. And so right now, as we're leading up to this 250th anniversary, we really have been starting a series where we are letting especially younger people, reminding older people, but letting younger people know the role that the black press has played. In addition to that, we've been focusing on stories about black land. These are stories that you're not going to see always in mainstream media. And so that's been an important topic to us, as well as us talking about, a lot of the stories that you see, what they're doing with criminal justice system. That's always been very important to me. And those are part of some of the questions that I raise in the White House. Now, whether they call on me or they don't call on me, they shadow banned and blocked people in the past before, and so we just still push through it. So AURN is committed to that. What kind of breaks our heart, number one, is I would love to see more black press in that briefing room, but the fight isn't always there. And for people who always ask me, well, why? We're saying all this because a lot of people don't realize it takes money. It takes money to
real resources
in order to do this. I'm part of what they call the radio press pool. We've already seen this administration kick out Voices of America from the press pool, and another outlet as well. And that was because they did not use the term Gulf of
America.
For what has always been the Gulf of Mexico.
So this is an administration where they are literally trying to change the language. Mm-hmm. And they're saying you cannot come in here unless you use the king's language. And Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson told y'all what y'all just elected and what the Supreme Court is helping to uplift. And so we've been spotlighting that, and it is not always easy. I'll tell you another reason why is because they also have opened up that room to anything and everything. There is so much MAGA in that room. It's utterly ridiculous. And what you don't see is after the briefings with Caroline Leavitt, I had to pause on that one. That press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, who doubles down and everything. I mean, it's her job. It is her job to put forth Trump's message, but I'm promising you, she's 10 toes down. I haven't seen anything like this. But there are a lot of interactions with black media off camera, because while the briefing is going on, we're hearing jeers from MAGA in the room while we're sitting trying to pay attention. It's maddening, but at the end of the day, we cannot forget our role, and we need people who care about justice, people who care about liberty, to not just support with their mouth. And I'm not doing a commercial to raise money, but you gotta
Black
also
media needs
support
to be
with your
supported.
dollars, because Black media is in a turn right now where we're also fighting to be heard, fighting for sustainability. And so I need people, again, whatever you watch, go to the website. People are on Substack, everything else. There's so many ways that you can support, because I think the question becomes, what happens if we don't have Black media?
And that's the scary thought.
And it doesn't just affect us, it affects America.
Black culture is American culture, and we know that when America gets a cold, Black America gets the flu. And we have always been at the forefront of making America a better place for everybody. Right now, we see a lot of trends in technology, and I want to ask the panel about this turn towards AI. I have been very, very concerned about AI at my newsroom at the Bay State Banner and how we use those tools. Many people exalt AI as the greatest thing since sliced bread, despite the Terminator movies and all the potential scariness that the basic concept brings. But what I have always been concerned about is using AI as a tool to create journalism, because AI is only as good as its author. It comes with the racism and stereotypes that the author of the AI has as they program it. That's why when we first saw the early soap dispensers, they wouldn't work on Black skin, they would only work on white skin, because they're only tested on that pigment of skin. So when you think about AI, I want to ask the whole panel, each of you take it one at a time, we'll start on this side. What are your concerns and hopes for AI, and how do you use it, or do you not use it?
So I think the concerns with AI are many, right? So what AI is essentially crowdsourced technology. So all of the journalism that's on the internet is available, right? And you can use this to write a new piece of journalism. Well, we know that most of the journalism on the internet is the white perspective, and it's been written by white people. So AI, if it is programmed properly, will give you a white perspective. That is what it is programmed to do, right? And it is often programmed to give you a wrong perspective. As a historian, I can't tell you how, I would say more than 50% of the time. And there's a study that showed it's the same with medical information. It's mostly wrong. Because here's the thing, it's crowdsourcing information. And most of the people on the internet don't know what they're talking about. Most of the people on the internet, for instance, think Rosa Parks sat at the back of the bus, right? So the AI is going to tell you that Rosa Parks sat at the back of the bus, right? Because it's crowdsourcing wrong stuff too. It doesn't vet the stuff. If most of us, since the beginning of the internet, thought that 2 + 2 was 5, then the AI model will tell you that 2 + 2 was 5, despite what the calculator would say. Again, it is a language, and even with math, there's studies that show it's getting math wrong too, because again, it is not an intelligence.
It's not independently evaluating information.
It is a
grabbing all of it, aggregating it, and spitting it back out.
Technically, what it is a next word guesser. So it starts, and what it guesses is what most of the people on the internet would think the next word is. And they do that, so it does that so fast that you think it's intelligent, right? And I think that is my concern, is that it is taking us backward into that veneer of white objectivity that prioritizes whiteness over truth.
So it is perpetuating the white is great stereotype that is built into our society over time, and regurgitating that in its information.
Right, but it's good at editing and telling you where a comma versus a semicolon should be.
And we do use AI for certain specific tools of editing and things of that nature.
Right.
Phil, I want to talk with you about the young people you work with. My young adults in our family and many of their friends really have a great affinity for AI and are excited about it. Sure. What have you found with your students, and what have you found with the readers and followers of Huffington Post?
Well, AI, I think, it's important to remember that AI is a product, right? And people are trying to sell it to you, and so I try to be very cautious whenever I see CEOs on TV saying like, hey, here's this new amazing thing, like I think it's important to be cautious whenever that happens, because I tend to find that magical products, just being facetious, but like products, these sorts of products are never always live up to the hype of just radically transforming society as people would like you to believe. But I think that it is useful in a lot of ways as far as pulling archives, right? It's like I know that there are some newsrooms that have decided to use AI to go through archive, like years, thousands of documents, decades of archives and things like that in history. So I mean, it has its uses. I think that it will not be able to replace the skill that it takes for humans to write. That is something that we have been doing for a very long time, right? And if you are using AI to currently write a story or write a piece of journalism, you're really plagiarizing from other people who've already done that, and that's a really good way to get fired. In a newsroom like mine, that's a great way to get fired, because we will find it, and you're able to kind of pay attention to those sorts of things. So I think that it has uses when it's going through files and documents, but as far as writing stories, I think we're a long way from AI being able to replicate the prose of like the New Yorker, for example.
AI is no journalist.
Yeah,
AI is a tool.
I'd like to add on to what Phil said, that is a thing that benefits the black press, is that it can lower costs. For instance, we can do story. I did a story a few weeks ago about examining, is it true that Democrat-run cities are more violent? And we went through the crime statistics, the FBI's crime statistics for every city in America, and found out that it wasn't true. Now, you can only do that with a technology tool.
Or a very, very large corporation that has a lot of
right, or yeah, like
right. So,
right. So it lowers those costs. I didn't have to hire a data analyst and a researcher,
team,
right? So I think that's the benefit that it could give us.
Definitely.
I think it's scary to see how the White House is using it. Number one, we've not seen any type of regulation. There's been a push for regulation in AI, but at the same time, I also want people to see who's cozying up to this administration. And in the back, I can't remember what the event was, and you saw all the major tech heads behind the president. You saw Oracle. It's the inauguration. They've been up there several times. And so, do I use AI? Absolutely, I use AI. There are so many great uses. But at the same time, as you're going to say, watch and pray, I'm watching to see the money that is coming into this administration, who I'm seeing up there consistently, and what their agenda is at the end of the day. Because we talked about Twitter, now X. Who owns it?
Yeah.
We know who owns the X platform. What have we seen come out of that individual, right? So I use Fanbase a lot, which is black owned. Isaac Hayes III. I like that platform, but I'm just saying it is a great tool to use. But in all of this, do not be deceived.
Yeah.
Always verify, always check, because it will spit you out stuff that ain't named, somebody didn't say, didn't do, doesn't make sense. And so there's a responsible way to use it. I also think we have to be careful, because we have seen some newsrooms come in and try to replace some of their writing staff, their whole writing staff, with AI, and which means you also have to begin to fact check those outlets as well. So there's always pluses and minuses to it, but it is where we're going. It's the age in which we're going. We're using AI when it comes to the criminal justice system. We're seeing some of the same issues as it relates to black and brown people. It's all around us. I need people to be aware of it so we're not, again, on the receiving end of what could take place in our communities.
Yeah, we as news creating entities and journalists have to use the tools of our society as actively and frequently as we can to help minimize costs. But we can't minimize the quality of our journalism. Talk to us, Dr. Chavis, about NNPA and the many publications that your organization has and how they consider AI and the importance of it.
Well, I'm sure most of our publications use AI to some extent. But to me, Ron, there's a larger contextual question about technology, about the purpose of who programs the programmers, or who writes the algorithm, who does the coding, toward what end. And I just want to remind the listening audience that I am proud that people of African descent establish calculus, establish geometry, establish mathematics, establish technology. Yet we find in this century as if we're waiting for somebody else to teach us what we've already learned. I'm not talking about machine learning, I'm talking about human being learning. Because if it wasn't for human being learning, there would be no machine learning. Now I know some people are trying to flip the script and say, okay, these machines are so smart, they're smarter than human beings. I don't accept that. You know, I believe that there's one God. I believe there's one human family. I believe that God has blessed each generation with gifts, talents. The question is, how do we use it, and toward what end? From a civil rights perspective, every inch of progress that black people have made in America wasn't just progress for black folks.
Right.
It made our society better. You know, and what we have done in the press also kind of reminds the press of its being. Why do we have the press? It was not but to tell the truth, the whole truth. James Baldwin was a close friend of mine. Ebony has heard me say this before. And one time we were...
Jimmy.
well, we were...
When you first told the story, you said, my friend Jimmy. And,
Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy.
Like, Jimmy.
One time, you know, some people pour libations. We were drinking libations.
I know that's right.
And so we were at this restaurant in downtown Los Angeles, and Baldwin reaches in his pocket, pulls out his pen. He says, man, the pen is mightier than the sword. The question is, he died in the mid-'80s. This was in the early 80s. He was perplexed of who he was going to pass his pen to.
who's going to be the next person?
Right. Not
pick up the
in an
mantle
individual
for-
sense,
yeah.
but in a generational sense.
Right.
Who will
Each generation has to use the pen. Each generation has to use the technology, going back to AI. We should never give up what God has blessed us with, our creativity, our sense of purpose, our sense of being. That's not exclusive. When I was growing up in Oxford, North Carolina, white people could attend our churches, but we couldn't attend white churches. Black folks in HBCUs have always accepted white students, but predominant white schools have not always accepted black students.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to make sure that even when we discuss AI, we do it from a larger context of how people contribute to the advances of humanity. You know, and I think sometimes we are miseducated, if I could use Carter G. Woodson's analogy, to make us think that this technology is beyond our grasp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When in fact, the technology grew from our grasp.
Yes.
Yep.
And I think the important thing to know is, again, like a lot of what we think is AI isn't, right? Like we think half of the stuff on the internet is AI. We had spell check before we start
Right.
calling it AI, and now they just call it AI.
Exactly.
Like a lot of it is just automation. We had Alexa before they started calling it AI because it was just automation,
Exactly.
and now they're calling it AI. We had Google where you could do a Google search before AI, and now that it comes in complete sentences, we call it AI, and a lot of the stuff is not AI that we're calling AI because, like Phil said, it is a product, not a type of technology. Right? There is no specific type of technology that yet is actually artificially intelligent. It doesn't exist.
It's a program that regurgitates.
Right. It's a next word guesser that crowdsources from information that we put on the internet.
I call it artificial ignorance. I don't call it artificial intelligence.
Right.
It is ignorance because they're definitely using it when it comes to elections. We saw the president This administration, right, even doubled down in actually when he was before he won, when he was running as candidate, use it in campaign ads, putting fake black people in the background,
yep,
six fingers, and we were like, that ain't it. Yeah. But those are the things. I mean, there have been many studies and reports that show right now we are in the age of misinformation and disinformation, and that's one of the biggest areas that we need to watch for as we get closer and closer to the elections, and so the midterm elections, and so I just want people to be aware. I think, as you were saying before, we need as a people to get in front of these things, to be in the ownership space of many of these things, to be on the front of it. But also, if you're not there, just be cautious in what you're seeing and what you are reading, because there are some things that many journalists have even fallen prey for when it comes to
things that appear to be real but that are totally fake and totally manufactured.
Exactly, and so we have to be responsible when we use it. Even when we see this administration not being responsible, is just like when the president decided to do an ad on Gaza. Like it was the next hot vacation spot, and use AI in that. I mean, it is. There are always ways that you can use something for good or for evil. And I just want us
remind everybody that it is a tool and not an end. It is a tool that has to be used and watched and guided carefully.
And it is okay to be skeptical of some things, right? That's one of the things that the black press has done, is been the skeptical arm of America, right? Like when I was growing up, most people thought like COINTELPRO and all that stuff was a conspiracy that they talked about, like only black people talked about, and then they found out it was like a legitimate government program, right? Yep. And the black press had been talking about Martin Luther King being followed and monitored for years, and now that we know it's true, we know that it's not a conspiracy theory, so it's okay to be skeptical about, like, there's a lot of stuff that we've been told, and then it's been exposed as a lie later on.
And that's why the black press has been such an anchor for the black community. Mm-hmm. So as we begin to wrap up, really quickly, I want to give everybody, quick 30 seconds. What are you most hopeful for? What are you most hopeful for? Quick answer, Dr. Chavis.
What gives me the greatest hope is that there's only one humanity. If the truth will be told, there's only one race, that's the human race. And if we need to work together to solve these racial oppression, racial discrimination, I'm working on anti-racist stuff, I'm working on anti-Semitic stuff. But the thing is, my greatest hope is our young people. I am not only optimistic, I'm encouraged by their hunger and their thirst for truth.
Ebony?
I would say with every challenge, there is always a promise. And what I'm loving is that in the midst of everything that we're seeing, we're also seeing behind the scenes black press outlets come together even more to figure out how we're going to tackle these issues, how we're going to come together and protect what we've always built and tell the truth about this country. That brings me hope.
Thank you. Phil?
I'm optimistic that people are coming together, like we said, and I'm also very encouraged that people are starting to realize the power of independent media.
Mike?
I feel the same way. I feel like, from our grandmother to philosophers have said, like, democracy dies in darkness, what's done in the dark can come to light, and I feel most proud that more people have lights now.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I want to thank all of you on my amazing panel for joining us today for GBH Amplifies the Bay State Banner. And I want to thank our wonderful partners at WGBH for their assistance in helping us to share our message with this nation. I want to thank Dr. Benjamin Chavis, Ebony McMorris, Philip Lewis, and of course, Michael Harriot for joining us today for Democracy on the Line, Black Journalists, and the Battle for a Free Press. It is a really, really important issue for our society. And I also want to thank you and remember that our conversation today will continue. It's such a big issue. It will continue in a forum next door in the Lenox Hotel, in which we will also feature many other local and national journalists to talk about the importance of this issue. I also want to thank our friends here at the GBH News Feed Cafe, I also want to remind us, a month from today, we will be here Thursday, January 15th, to celebrate Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Day and the history and today's civil rights struggles with the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, with the Boston chapter of the NAACP, and with Reverend William Broderick II, who is the pastor of the historic 12th Baptist Church. I want to remind everybody, BayStateBanner.com. Go to BayStateBanner.com as the banner celebrates its 60th anniversary, and we celebrate the State of Black America Forum series. I also want to thank our wonderful crew here, Juan Jose Candias, Juan, Maddie Greer, Chris Hanks, Steve Baracus, and Bill Francis. Sorry for the mispronunciations. GBH Amplify is produced with our wonderful producer, Sandra Lopez-Burke, as well as Lauren Herbert. And I am your host, Ronald Mitchell, editor and publisher of New England's Bay State Banner. And I want to thank all of you for watching. Thank you so much.